Hey, Mike, can you hear me okay?
I just need to unmute myself, but when I do, I can tell you I hear you perfectly fine.
So, improvement, less improvement.
Improvement, much.
All right, I have a new headset.
Great.
Yeah, fun stuff. All
Did
right.
you find one headset that actually does work?
Well, I skipped the Bluetooth one and went for old-fashioned cable.
You mean like me?
Yeah,
Cable?
like one of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice little break, and we are going to flip over to session number 2, which Mr. Michael is going to take the lead on. So, go ahead and share your screen, sir.
I can absolutely share my screen. I just need to hide everything that you're not supposed to see.
All the super secret stuff.
Well, yeah, kind of ish. Am I doing the PowerPoint slide or are you doing the slide?
You're doing the slide. You're the slide master.
I'm the slide master. Holy cow! Let's do that. And go away. And I need to be the presenter thing.
I can do it. I have that power within me.
I know you have.
Are you sure? Yes, I am sure. How about
Show
now?
my screen, and I need to select the right screen. That's the screen. Show my screen. You should see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Is it the right screen?
Yep.
Sweet. Yes. So let's start with a demo, because that's always fun to do a demo. Let's remove that one and go here. Wrong server, the server. Now, doing demos, this is how we do it. I want to download the image a couple of times. Therefore, I created a PowerShell module for that. I also created PowerShell modules to create all the VMs, because when you do a lot of testing, one of the most important things is to be able to repeat things. I just hate to click and type in credentials and passwords and stuff. So we created PowerShell modules for deploying and testing and configuring. So that machine is up and running. We're going to grab another one. Let's do a connection to that. Let's boot it up. And I'm not doing Pixie here. I'm doing media. Really doesn't matter as long as the machine can boot. I'm good. Hey, it's booting. This is something that Johan might have seen or might not have seen. But we recently added a pre-start menu or pre-start show me stuff menu.
Please, you're welcome.
Yeah, something like that. It looks like this. So I need to press a key, and that gives me the ability to do things like run the Dart tools. If I added that, yeah, I did. So I can do the Dart tools here. I can do the PowerShell command prompt, or I can just continue. The reason for doing that is that in the situation we are, we need to make sure that all the disks are cleaned, wiped, cleaned again, and wiped twice, since we have an incident. But in general, that could be a smart thing, because it means that you can set an IP address statically, or you could check things, or whatever. Maybe you need to do things before. In this case, we do have credentials. For customers, we usually put the credentials in the boot image, so they don't need to type anything here. But in our case, we don't have that, because we are testing with manually typing the credentials, which means copy and paste. But it could be fully automated. I do remember when we had this in the beginning. I know that Johan said, have you ever tried to do skip wizard and make everything unattended? And I said, no, we haven't. Well, then I need to do that. And of course, it didn't work. Now it does. So yeah, it could be fully unattended because it works the same way as Light Touch. It's using custom settings.ini and bootstrap.ini, and it's the same relationship. Bootstrap is on the media, custom settings.ini is on the share. This is an awful wizard, but for now it works. So I can pick a client here, and I'm going to pick that client. I can put a password in here. Don't confuse me now. And I can join the domain or just do a work group, or do I need to set a computer name? No, it will be randomized. And then we have a drop-down menu. This is just bogus stuff, but we are testing things, so they won't do anything. But in theory, since we use this for various things, this is not a customer site. This is our internal site. So we are deploying servers, domain controllers, file servers, print servers, Hyper-V host machines, everything infrastructure, as well as client, as well as this little special nifty thing. Here is an incident workstation. I was asked by the security team, they want to have an incident workstation with the latest version of Windows 10, including applications I never heard of. And so they're in there. And when we deploy the machine, they have an incident workstation. And once they finished working with that customer, they just throw it away. We also have privileged access workstation and other things. Go start. That's pretty much it. A bit boring. It does run various things. You can see it's doing a PSD inventory WinP, and it does a version check. It's sending back data through our web services. We will talk about that later on. And yes, this is the BIOS machine. So let's flip back from demo. So the PowerShell Deployment Extension Kit was something that Michael Niehaus showed us at MMS many years ago. And Johan and I was in the front row, and we were like, holy cow, can you do that? The reason for Microsoft, no, for Michael Niehaus to do so was that he thought that VB script is getting old. And that doesn't matter. It's just that people don't know VB script today. So somebody's asking, is everything you're showing today available on the current version on GitHub? Almost everything. The pre-start menu is not there, and some of the extra scripts are not there, but everything else is. And yes, we will update and modify this as soon as I'm done with this darn incident. So it's based on Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, and something that people usually don't know is that Microsoft Deployment Toolkit is based on PowerShell. Everything in Microsoft Deployment Toolkit is PowerShell, except one thing. Ta-ta, the task sequence. That is still a VB script. So the idea was for Niehaus to say, well, if we change that last part, everything is PowerShell. Now you can't see the other part of PowerShell because they're baked into the MMC files and to DLL files, so they are compiled. Sorry about that, but that's the way it's built. But everything is actually PowerShell. And what he did was, as a proof of concept, started to flip VB script into PowerShell script for two purposes. One, PowerShell is more modern than VB script. PowerShell has other capabilities. This task sequences you can see in MDT and as well as the integration in Config Manager is based on SMS 2003. The idea was to have the task sequence look the same way. And when we talked with Niehaus, he said, you know, they never needed to be that big. They don't need to do all that stuff. They just need to lay down the operating system with configuration and install application. If we do this with PowerShell, we can also change the templates, and you're going to see that later on. The templates are shorter. It uses the deployment workbench. Therefore, for an administrator, it looks exactly the same way. There's no difference. It's still, update boot image, import application, import operating system, modify cs.ini. All that stuff is the same thing. The trick, which is, we can look at it later on, but the really cool thing is that, and it took a while for me to understand this, but if you played with Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, you know that everything is PowerShell underneath, right? And if it's PowerShell underneath, then the entire configuration is actually accessible through PowerShell without having the workbench. Yes. So the way it works is that it downloads the control folder, more or less, using HTTP, and then it loads the PowerShell module to that. So the client is in Windows P actually running the workbench components. That means we have a view of a mirror that is in the cloud. And that makes it so easy to access data because we know where we got the control files from. So it works pretty much like Config Manager. It's using a cache. It downloads everything to the cache, mounts the cache as a deployment share, and then we access everything in it. And the way it then works is that we say, we need to have this file. It's in the cache? No, it's not in the cache. Get the file. That's why we talked about providers. PSD currently supports HTTP, HTTPS, and it supports UNC. If Johan and I go bananas a night, we can have it running FTP the next day. If we go more bananas, we can use a content delivery network and put in Napster in it if we want to. The only question we have is time. We need time.
Plus the very fact that that's not going to happen, but it could.
Well, we're not going to use Napster, but using BitTorrent is pretty cool because a lot of these CDN providers do provide everything you put in the content as a BitTorrent configuration. And uTorrent is command line based and it runs in Windows PE. And I already did that, and you know that because I did that for a company in Sweden. We deployed machines using BitTorrent.
I'm not cool to. It was cool back then, but no, I think I'll stick to branch cache for now. I'm old school.
Yeah, well, so that's the way it works that way, and that means it can be modified into to any method, which is kind of cool. So taking a look at the server side, let's go to the non-secret server side. This is the server side, and yeah, as I told you, it looks. I mean, this is the PS deployment share right here with images and drivers. And I don't have any packages and task sequences and monitoring and all that stuff. And you compare this to this one, which is a legacy production share with in theory, the same thing. There's no difference. It looks the same way. The difference is when you come here and you take a peek look at the task sequence. Not that one, but this one. It's slightly shorter, but it has the same step. Here's the validation step. Here's the run backup. In this case, it doesn't do a backup because I'm still working on the development of this. But we have the disk partitioning, UEFI. We are setting the driver group to something. We are injecting the drivers. We're installing the operating system. It really almost looked the same way. There are things underneath that aren't the same, but in general, it's just task sequence. So if you want to play with PSD, here's what I recommend. Don't touch that. Don't touch that. Don't poke with that. Don't do anything here. But you can do whatever you like in custom tasks.
So, Mike, there was a question coming in. is everything that we are showing available in the current PSD version on GitHub? And the answer to that question is obviously most.
Yes.
For example, the menu that I have added to allow me to select an Intune group, that one is not there. Some of the web service script that you've been working, they're not there, but the framework, the platform that we've been demonstrating, yes, it is there.
And the pre-start is not there either. But
Yep.
these are minor things, and as soon as we have a few hours over, and I think that's going to be the next week, we're going to internally test and verify and get everything together, and well, then we release new version. So it's there. The way to create task sequences is the same, right? You type a name and you give it a name and an ID and all that stuff. The difference is that you now have a PSD standard client task sequence and a PSD standard server task sequence. I'm working on making core server work. That part doesn't work right now, but the UI version of Windows Server and Windows Client works perfectly fine. The other task sequences is here. They won't work. You can't use them. We haven't decided if we should remove them yet, but they can't be used. This one does work. You can use the custom task sequence because it doesn't contain anything. So that's the way it is. You do it the same way you always done it. It's nothing fancy. There are, however, a few things that are different, and let's flip over to the production environment. This is a live system currently running, which means I need to be careful where I poke because there's customer information in this. But we do have drivers the same way that everybody else have. You import the drivers here, and they are here, and they are in a folder. Like everything else, it's in a folder. But Johan and I added another folder. The folder is named PSD Resources. And PSD Resources contains stuff that we need to have in a different manner. And here you can see there's a folder called Driver Packages. And here's where we create a folder for every make and model we have. And you can see that the name of the folder is kind of matching the folder structure we have here. So we have an extract PowerShell script that grabs all the drivers in a certain folder, and you pick and choose, and then it's going to create the folder and create the zip file or the WIM file if we're using WIM files instead. And then we download that particular folder. And that's going to be the trick. We found that out using bits and WebDAV, because that's what we do. We use WebDAV currently. Means you can more or less, it's easier to download the content of a folder than to pick an individual file. So for drivers, we just download the entire folder. The folder contains one file, and if it's a zip file, we unzip it and install all the drivers. If it's a WIM file, we mount it, and then we inject all the drivers, and then we dismount it. So that's why we have these extra folders. We also have a plugin system, and currently the only plugin we have been working with is 2 Bits ACP. Since it's free, we want to have it, and we know how it works, and it makes sense to use it. Checking a task sequence, and I can go to one of the task sequence here. I think I have it. Yeah. So here's the Windows 10 2004 with Office 365, and I can show that. So the only thing we have here is going to be, well, these are custom. These are not on GitHub, but it's a way to check if the machine is in approved list or not. Then we set the version that we can check this task sequence against, and then we run the script, and that reports then back to web services. We also do an inventory in Windows PE, which means that as soon as the machine starts up, it feeds back the information about when the operating system deployment started, the name the machine got, and the make and model. And the reason why I want to do this is because in a normal case, and correct me if I'm wrong, Johan, when we work with customers, we go on site and we say, okay, now the solution is done. Now we need to stage the machines, and they bring in a truck with laptops and desktops and say, hey, these are supposed to be working. And then you take one by one, fix the drivers and all that stuff. The way I work right now, I don't know. I have no idea what they have in the other end. And if I ask the customer, it says, yeah, it's a laptop. Thank you. What make and model is it? It's an HP. Uh-huh. Which one? Something 820. Okay. I can't do driver packages based on that. I don't know what it is. So I asked them to just start a deployment that I know is going to fail. But as soon as Windows PE kicks in, it reports back the make and model. I can go to the database where I store all the information, copy and paste, create a folder, download the drivers, create a package, and then I ask the customer, please do it again. We also recently found out, and I'm not telling you to do this, but you should consider this. All the vendors do have tools for automatic firmware and driver updates. Dell have one. It's called the Dell Update Command Utility, and HP has their new HP imaging system. Both of them can be run using a command line. And HP is actually the coolest one because it's on PowerShell Gallery. So you download it directly from PowerShell Gallery. Once you download it, you just enable it, and it will download all the applications and firmware for that machine. So I provide the basic drivers that I know is going to work for the device, and then the device will connect back to the vendor site and do everything else. I can't control exactly what it does install. I can affect it, but I can't control it. So it will download applications if you say applications, but you can't pick what applications, which means that it's not going to be perfect, but at least the machine will have all the features enabled, all the application that comes from the vendor of the device that is device related, no garbage, but all these tools like the, I don't know, HP keyboard, blah, 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 control panel applet thing, which we install. And then, and installing the operating system is just laying it down, so that's fine. And then we enable this, a BC enabler that is enabled for branch cache, and that enables the component that 2Pint software provides, which we put in the boot image. And once we lay down the operating system, injecting all the drivers, well, then it's time to restart the computer. But before we do that, we move the branch cache to the operating system volume. So the branch cache will be there, and it stays there for 28 days, according to Andreas, unless the data is acquired within those 28 days, because then the counter is set back to 0. So if you deploy more seldom than 30 days, then the cache is gone. But if you deploy a machine within 28 days, well, then it's going to be kept and it's going to be updated again and again. And in the end, we run a PSD inventory operating system, and that's just to get all the data back to the database. And talking about that, it basically looks like this. So if I get a computer which I have deployed, which is next to me, and I run that, it's going to spit out that ID in the database, serial number, operating system, HP, volume size, blah, 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 blah. I can gather whatever I want to gather. It's not a question of if it's more of whatever I want. And let's see if I can find a script that we do that for. Not that one, not that one. Yeah, here it is. So the PSD hardware, which we haven't published yet, it will be published, is going to run this on the server side. and it runs this on the client side. So whatever you want to have inventoried in the end of the deployment, yeah, we just create a hash table of it, convert it to a JSON file, and then we do an invoke REST method, and that's it. That engine is currently running here. So we can see every time there is a question coming in. And right now, this is not using a certificate, but it basically puts all the data in the database, and then we can extract that, give the report back to the customer, import it into any kind of platform if we want to do that. There are other ways to do this as well, and you don't need to have this, but I need to have it because then I know exactly what we have deployed, where it was, what sequence it was, how long time did it take, what kind of hardware did they have, and a funny thing here, I think you can see that. Yeah, see if you can see that. Yeah, oh yes. It says here in inventory approved model false, driver package, task sequence ID, but we actually added another thing for that as well. Let's go and do just this. Okay, so here you can see other things like UFI, TPM, virtual machine. But if you look here, it says unknown devices, 0. That is an inventory we do when we deploy the machine. We check the device manager for unknown devices. If the number is 0, then we know that this machine received all the drivers that was needed for that device, so we don't have any unknown devices, which means that this is, for me, a guarantee. Yep, this machine worked perfectly fine. It was deployed successfully. Yes, it did have all the drivers and blah, 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 which is kind of nice to have. I like databases and statistics. So there's a lot of things that you can make happen on the server side by adding a RESTful API. We also have the monitor. I can't show you the monitor because it's live. It contains customer named devices, and they will most likely kill me if I show you that, so I can't do that. The pre-start menu we talked about, it looks like this. You basically just define a combo item. This is just random names of different locations, but it could be anything, and that means you can pick and choose. In theory, this could be set by something else, like default gateway or something like that, but in this case, we're using this as a drop-down menu. So this file can be modified in any way. The restart, the pre-start thing, is also extendable. In this case, we first run the PSD sample pre-start. It's not really a sample pre-start. You can see this. It's going to compile .NET Framework. It's running the runtime, the compiler runtime, the runtime compiler, to make everything else happen faster, because now everything is compiled. And then we run this. If you want to add something, yeah, you could. That's not special or weird or anything like that. This is the pre-start that runs, and here's the pre-start menu. You can have it do it whenever you want. It's just modify it as you wish. And here's the wait for the prompt thing. So if you want to have another item in here, add it, save the script. It's dynamically saved, so you don't need to update the boot image. We are thinking of creating something a bit more dynamic, but currently that's the way it works. Yeah. So how do you install this? Well, I already installed MDT and I installed ADK, and all these stuff is installed. If I go to this one, and I want to create a new solution, I want to create another deployment share. Let's call it 49. Let's define the names of that. Then we go into the PSD folder and we run PSD install, define the folder, define the share, and checks a bunch of things and builds a new deployment share. And moving out some files that we don't need to have anymore. We don't want to throw them away. We don't need them, but we don't want to throw them away. Once we have that, we configure WebDAV for a new PSD share. We just define the virtual directory and deployment folder, and that's going to configure everything in IIS. Ta-ta, then you're done. Then I create a few items because I do this pretty often, and then I don't want to do this manually. This is going to take another few seconds, and then we're done. I think it's the logging that actually takes time. This machine is in Azure. You can, of course, run this locally if you want to. Copying modules. Creating all the resources. I like this. It says relaxing permissions for PSD $49. Then we run this. And it doesn't have any output. Once that is done, because that's building the WebDAV configuration in IIS, we create this. And that was the wrong folder, but it doesn't matter. And let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go here. And let's do a refresh. And you can see there's a PSD 49. So the only thing I need to do is now configure this. Properties, rules, we need to define this, bootstrap.ini. We need to change this into HTTP. And one of the things we have here, and I can't show you that directly, I can show you that over here because it's not equally dangerous, is that we have the bootstrap.ini, and yes, you can see this, it's just a demo network, so it doesn't matter. We have something called PS deploy routes, and you can see there's actually two of them here. It's really two deployment routes. And you can have multiple. In this case, it's going to first try the HTTP location, which is local in my case, and if that doesn't answer, it's going to shift into USC. So what you can have is that you have a deployment solution on-prem as well as in the cloud. If you have the ability to access the on-prem solution, then it does. If that doesn't answer, then it's going to try the cloud one, and then it goes to the cloud and go like, hey, that's a cloud. We are planning to have something like having multiple locations and measure which location is fastest, and then use that one, or feature-based or something like that. We just haven't done it yet, as always. And this is basically the entire file we need to have for rules to make this work. We need to define things like, yep, we're using SMST's download program, bits ACP. We also actually need to add another one that's not here, and that's going to be branch cache enabled, yes. And then you need to define this, and that's it. So the only thing I need to do in this share that I have here is starting to add content to it, and nothing fancy about that. So that was the server side. You can download it from GitHub Friends of MDT PSD. Have you tried putting the deployment share into an Azure file share? Yes. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because it doesn't support WebDAV. Would it be possible to use that in the future? Yes, that's why we're working on figuring out another content delivery mechanism. So right now we have two. As soon as we solve a bunch of other issues, we will absolutely have this in other location as well. Do you have your username and password in clear text? Well, it depends on how you see this. The username and the password is only accessing the boot image. The boot image doesn't contain anything other than Windows PE. Then you need to access your deployment share. Okay, so you can access the deployment share. The only thing you can see in the deployment share is going to be applications and WIM files. So the question is, why is it limited to WebDAV? Because Niehaus wrote it that way. I think that's a good answer. He's using WebDAV.
I can add some context to that. It's quite simple through a WebDAV type gateway to enumerate and request and download large lists of files from a web server. Yeah. It was just a very convenient way to say, hey, this folder, I want to just give me all that's in it instead of having to request individual files. Otherwise, just WebDAV it's a good platform for that, and it's been around quite some years, and it's solid. So I think that was one of the main reasons it was chosen.
Yeah, it's nothing fancy or anything. It's just, you can see the code in here. It's using Propfind, and that's why we are thinking of having another way. If we can say find the content.xml file, well, then we can download everything locally, and then we can process that information locally, and we don't need to query anything. And that is, again, it's just a provider. So we need to write other providers. For FTP, for instance, then we can use the FTP directory listing. For having it directly in Azure on a web site or web service or anything like that, then we need to figure out another way to download the information. So it's just time, again, as always. And we have a few other things to fix before we add another content provider.
Yeah, I'm about to write the floppy disk provider together with the IP over avian carriers provider. That's going to be my next.
Yes, the IP over avian carriers is going to be awesome. We just need to extend the timeout, and then it's going to fly really good. So you can download it today if you want to and start playing with it. So the question is, why are we using HTTP? And now Johan and I have been playing with this a lot. The initial thought we had is that HTTP or HTTPS is slower than SMB. It turns out not so much. So am I using SMB in my local network? No, I'm not. I'm using HTTP in my local network because it's easier, and it's actually almost equal the fast. But the other thing is that HTTPS is stateless. It has the ability to survive retries better. It has the ability to resend or download and things like that. So it's easy. It's also using what's called the universal firewall bypass port 80 and port 443. When we are running incidents, it's super easy to ask the networking guys and say, hey, can you open port 443 and port 80 to this particular IP address across the internet? And they go like, sure. What's on the other side? Never mind, just open them. Sure. If I ask them to open everything to Microsoft, they're going to go like, no. The ransomware comes from Microsoft because somebody put it in Azure. Okay, so we can't open everything, but I can always point to an IP address, which means it's easy. It also means that we can use things like branch cache and 2Pint softwares, the OSD toolkit, which we are using. So in general, transporting data over HTTP, HTTPS is in theory pretty slow, but in practical terms, pretty good. It works. It can be cached. It can be compressed. It's easy to do authentication, and it's easy to reach. So
Yeah,
HTTPS is
we actually got a comment from Nihas himself. Apparently, he sneaked into the meeting at some point here,
oh
and it
nice.
was indeed it is built on IIS, and there was a
Yeah,
need to get a list of files in a folder. Hence the web dev choice there. So just nothing special,
exactly.
default working, and I like working.
I do. So the way it's, we're going to look at the code later on, but the way it was designed is that it says basically, I need content. Okay, what's your deploy route? It's an HTTP. Okay, then I do it this way. It's an HTTPS. Okay, then we do it this way. It's an UNC pass. Okay, then we do it this way. And that's the point. We could have detection for more or less any provider. It's just about writing them, because then the code will automatically, everything else is automatically going to work.
I mean, another reason for the 83 and 83s and bits type transfer is that they work very well. The peer-to-peer content with, whereas anyone who tried to do SMB file type, UNC type sharing of content realized that maybe not the best.
So if we talk about use cases here, we talk about some of them, but we use this for privileged access workstation deployment. And if you don't know exactly what it is, it's a secure workstation for managing items. When we work with customers, they go like, well, we already have a deployment solution. Yes. You're using config manager. Yes. That means that your config manager admin is going to be domain admin. No. He's just a config manager admin. No, he can manage these devices. A privileged access workstation should be managed by the admin only. So no agents, no tools, no relationship with anything. It needs to be standalone, and it needs to have a trusted image. So therefore, we use this to deploy privileged access workstations, both virtualized and physical. Security incidents, which I'm working on currently, deploy to weird places. Sometimes we need to have a workstation in a data center, and there's no way we can get a media in, or it's just horrible to try to deploy something in that area because it's prohibited, it's blocked. But for some reason, HTTP and HTTPS is almost always allowed. There are situations where that doesn't work.
Yeah, lately I've been working with a few construction companies, and they built up these temporary building locations. Sometimes they're there for just a few weeks, sometimes a good few years, but the thing they have in common is they are pretty small usually, and they just need to get something up and going super quick.
And they
of
need
course,
to
the Starbucks
redeploy
is
the
a valid
machine.
one too.
Yeah, and they need to fix the machine if it's broke, and they need to do things. So that's going to work. And we started to think about, well, if it works for all these weird cases, doesn't it work for all the regular cases? Yeah, it does. So a customer that today is using MDT, they could easily say, well, we're going to shift the primary deployment solution to use PSD because it's going to work across the entire network. And both Johan and I have worked with a couple of customers that they want to have the concept of deploy. They call it deploy anything, deploy anywhere. It's not really anything because it's Windows devices, but anywhere actually works. And they added things to it that makes it possible to do domain join and VPN connections and things like that. So can't they use autopilot? Yeah, they can. They just for some reason don't want to, so they have their own deployment solution. And in some cases, it really makes sense. It also works with existing solutions because, I mean, yeah, you can do Azure AD join. It's simple. It's just sysprep device in the end, and the user goes like, hey, I need to log on with my name and password. Yeah, that's going to work perfectly fine. You can use a regular AD join. Can you do an offline domain join? Yeah, you could do an offline domain join. It's just tricky because the machine needs to have a line of sight to the server, but in theory, you can do that. We can put it into Intune if you want to. We can do autopilot. We can do recover. Autopilot is great. I like that, but it doesn't solve the problem of somebody shooting something through the hard drive or mechanical failures in general, or it could be scary when you have the security incident scenario. Maybe we should reinstall. You can even use it together with Config Manager, unless you use the Config Manager built in. But in some scenarios, maybe you don't want to have that feature. You want to use your own solution. In that case, you can use PSD for that as well. That's also going to work perfectly fine. So looking in the scripts, just for the fun of it, to see what it looks like. In the scripts folder, we suddenly have lots of PowerShell scripts. It's not that crazy, but the most important script of them all, which is kind of the brain of this, is going to be a script called PSD start. And PSD start is the one that runs everything.
PSD it's basically start, equivalent of the light touch WSF script that did all the heavy lifting in exactly. old school MDT.
So this is what happens. You boot on the media, and this is the one script that runs first. Bang. And the purpose of this is interesting. A task sequence is using it's using a data store for its variables. And in Config Manager, you start the task sequence and that's it, right? But in Light Touch, that doesn't really happen because we need to feed the task sequence with data. So the gather process is gathering information. And once we have all the information we want to have, we are importing the module of PS deployment share, which gives us the TS environment. And then we feed the TS environment with all the data we need to have. And once that is done, we are looking for an in progress task sequence. So, okay, is there any task sequence running? If not, it's going to restart, create a new one. And when it creates a new one, it's going to read all the data from the TS environment PS drive, and then just starts. Once the task sequence has completed, it's going to find this because it has an exit code. So the script is picking up the exit code, and once it's done that, it's either going to be 0, which is awesome because that means we're done and succeeded. This exit code has a feeling of error, but it's not. That exit code means we need to reboot. And what we do then is that we clean out a few things and make sure that all the data that we need to have on the next reboot is on the right location. And once that is done, we just restart the machine. And when it restarts, it's going to fire up the PSD start again and check for a sequence, which it finds, and continue to doing the sequence. And that repeats until the machine is done. We had some interesting features with this, but it took a while to make sure that reboot actually does work. But now it does. So the only script that I would say don't poke too much in is going to be PSD start. All the other scripts that we have, they are more or less standalone. This is the driver script. This is the configure unattended XML script. This is the update script. This is the and so on and so on. So all these scripts are standalone except for PSD start, which is the main script that runs everything else. That's pretty much on the script side. There's a bunch of modules as well, and these modules are, in general, nothing you need to poke in. There's a bunch of them. I'll show you here where they are in tools, modules. There's a PSD wizard. Makes sense. It's a PSD utility, contains lots of lifted small things we needed to have. Gather, which is gathering the data, and the deployment share, which deals with the get content, find where we are, and deal with all the content from the deployment share. These two are native MDT Microsoft modules. They are more or less just DLL files that contains the information of dealing with the task sequence, which is fine, and dealing with the what we call the light version of the workbench, meaning that it gives us access to the workbench as a PSD drive, which means we can find items and things like that. So what is planned? Johan, what are we planning to do?
Well, first of all, it's always been trying to get more people involved in helping out, because so far it's been primarily you, me, some extent Andreas helping out doing the development of the platform. And recently we started getting some more testers that can help us try and test on hardware that we don't have access to for testing, which is the hardest part, I think, because even though I have a large set of laptop stuff at home, it's hard to compete with an organization having like 100 models. So we certainly look for volunteers that will be able to help out to do some testing and feedback. We just got the 4th developer coming in. Rick was helping out with a better wizard, so that's planning out, and one that is actually looks nice. It's more modern.
Yep.
You and me, we are good at many things, but possibly design might not be our like highest superior skill.
I'm not allowed to do anything with colors involved.
But Rick has done a lot of development work for a lot of different customer projects, so I'm looking forward to get a more responsive wizard in that sense.
There's actually
otherwise, testing. That's been the thing too. I mean, we only support a subset of what's available in MDT at the moment, so we don't do refresh and replace currently. We don't do in-place upgrade currently. We do bare metal imaging. That's pretty much it, and we want to expand to add in support for additional scenarios into the platform. We do custom sequences if you just want to do apps, that works. But I mean, the end goal has always been to be comparable in terms of feature set, what the legacy MDT can do, what we can do with the extension. But of course, being able to image anything was the #1 priority to get things going. So that's why we started the efforts on making sure that worked.
Yeah, we have a few questions. One is awesome. It's a perfect question. I think Amy wrote that question. It's a typical perfect question. Is there a way to migrate your existing deployment shares items, apps, drivers, task sequences, etc., to a newly created PSD share? In theory, the answer is yes. Practically, what you want to do is leave it alone, create a new one, and then you can easily copy applications, you can copy drivers, but you can't copy task sequences.
No, we're using a different template to have to copy over use those items, and you will find that this one is much shorter than the old ones used to be, because we didn't have to consider a lot of the legacy stuff for like XP deployments that was happening back in the days and things. We've been focusing on Windows 10 and Windows Server 2016, 2019 imaging only. So we were able to make it more smaller, and we also put a lot of logic inside the scripts that was previously in the script sequence. But it's very, very easy to take what you have and just copy over to a new deployment share. So you can have them side by side, and it's just the boot image that tells the difference.
Then we have another question. Will Microsoft BDD components continue to be updated by Microsoft? And the honest answer is we have no idea.
I kind of expect so, because it already happened once. There was a bug in ADK 2004 where the UEFI detection in Windows changed, and that also affected WinP. So they actually had to make a code change both in Config Manager as well as in MDT, and they did that and released that as a hotfix. I forgot when, May, June, something this year. So
But
I expect it when needed, but I mean, there is not like a heavy development going on the MDT side of things.
No, it's because it's working.
Yeah. Another question is, will it support ARM64? Well, first of all, I didn't have an ARM64 device to test with, but ARM in theory is supposed to support 32-bit desktop apps very well, and there is indeed a 32-bit sequence engine version, so maybe that worked, but it would be nice to get the native ARM and ARM64 sequence engine. I just don't know if this will happen. I actually asked that in the forum a little while ago to the product manager, Mr. York, but no reply yet.
On the question, is BDD going to hang around? I think this is just what I believe. I think that as long as there is a need for people to image devices, there's a need for a tool from Microsoft to image devices. And using a media is not really a solution. So last time I checked with Microsoft, they didn't have any plans to decommission it. They might, but nobody's told me so far. And even if they do so, we're going to have a heads up for a long time. But let's assume, and I really say let's assume that they will give this up. If they do, it's going to take us, I don't know, a couple of months to replace it.
My think is going to stick around for a while. I mean, I'll be doing OS deployment now for almost 30 some years, but I do expect not having to do it for more than another 30 years going forward. And by then, I'm pretty good for retirement, I think, because I'll be old.
Yeah, I'm 10 years ahead of you. I only have 20 more years to go. Now, the thing is that, and we talked about it, in theory, would it be possible to replace the entire task sequence engine with the side state configuration as well as pure PowerShell script? And the answer is yes, it is. It is absolutely doable. But there's no value of doing that right now, because as long as we have the task sequence and it's working, it is better to use that and to purify it to make it better than to just start all over. Once somebody pulls down the curtain and say, no more MDT, BDD, that's going to disappear. No more config manager. It's either going to exist another solution. Okay, or let's build one. It's not going to be that hard.
As I mentioned, I personally don't believe that will happen in the foreseeable future.
Neither do I.
I don't see it coming. I see more options become available, but I don't see the core imaging piece go away anytime soon.
No. We also have a new tester on board.
Hey, welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. There's another question that says, did the support of the new driver model pushed by Microsoft application from it's I know
don't get me started on that one. That's been an interesting change, to say the least. We do support Apex packages, and those are Apex packages, but it's been a little bit tricky to get that going in the current platform. Works a little bit easier in Config Manager in that sense, but
it's tricky in any platform. Those driver apps is tricky no matter what. But
we
yeah,
can still add command lines that run this and that, perhaps those packages in as part of our deployment. That works equally well in MDT and PSD as it does in Config Manager. And some of the vendors, for example, HP, we talked about them before, they include these store type apps, modern apps, universal, what's the name? UVP apps as part of their packages now as well. So the only thing I don't recommend is don't block the store, at least not the private store, because you can get them that way also, because you want to get updates to them as well down the road. And if you block all that stuff, not only do you make Windows insecure by not patching those components of Windows, but you also not patching third-party components. And over the years, it actually have been security risks in also drivers and their services, and they need to be patched as well.
Yeah, and looking at the new version of Windows 10, everything that is language packs, language settings, that's business store applications. It's supposed to be the user that says, I want to have this language, and then it downloads from the business store. So blocking the business store is actually a really bad idea, and eventually there's going to be things that doesn't work. So you're going to need to have the business store enabled anyway.
So keep the questions coming. We have a quick break coming up. We promised you we will have once we have a chance to just get away for a little bit. So 1:30 is when we will back. So if you can just put up a notepad document or WordPad or some fancy editor and just write in a lunch break or a quick break until 1:30.
I want to change back to your as the presenter, Johan.
That could also